The first time I was in an ambulance, I didn't know why I was there.
The first time I was reading out loud, I didn't know why I was reading so slowly and everyone was looking at me.
I was on my way to the doctor's office with my mom, and she was driving, and I was in the back seat listening to my iPod. And we were almost there, and that's the last thing I remember. But I was tapping my foot, and my mom had asked me to stop several times, but I kept tapping my foot, and she finally pulled into the parking spot. And she was getting pretty frustrated at this point, as she said. And she got out of the car, and she came to the side of the car where I was and opened the door. She said, "Becca, get out of the car." And I didn't respond, and just kept tapping my foot. So she pulled a headphone out of my ear and undid my seatbelt, and I just fell out of the car. And at that point, she started to panic, and she said that I was shaking, my whole body was jerking, and there was foam coming out of my mouth, and she was really scared. She had gotten someone in the parking lot to help her put me in a wheelchair, and next thing I knew, woke up in an ambulance and had no idea what was going on, and that's when this whole process started. Epilepsy is a condition of the brain causing seizures. A seizure is a disruption of the electrical communication between neurons. The average incidence of epilepsy each year in the United States is estimated at 150,000. When the incidence of epilepsy is looked at over a lifetime, 1 in 26 people will develop epilepsy at some time in their life. I have tonic-clonic seizures, which are convulsive seizures in which a person loses consciousness, muscles stiffen, and jerking movements occur in the body, usually lasting 1 to 3 minutes.
When I was in sixth grade, I was diagnosed with a seizure disorder. All I remember was sitting in course class, and then next thing you know, I'm in an ambulance and I'm in the hospital. I have no idea what's going on. I'm confused. I have a horrible migraine. Later, I find through testing that I have a seizure disorder. The type of seizures I have are called cursive seizures. Cursive seizures are when individuals may walk or run into obstacles without consciousness. When they come out of the seizure, they are in a state of confusion, but they're able to function. This is often present in the temporal lobe. When I was in ninth grade in 2008, I was diagnosed with a learning disability. I just remember sitting in class and reading and not knowing how to pronounce words, reading really slow. Everyone's just staring at me. And I was just really confused and embarrassed. Later on, I had to do a lot of tests, and I found out that I have a learning disability. A learning disability is when an individual has difficulty learning and using academic skills to the level expected of those of the same age. The difficulties are not better accounted for other impairments, disorders, or disabilities.
So I was diagnosed with epilepsy in 2006, so it was my freshman year of high school. I didn't really know what was going on. I knew that epilepsy caused me to have seizures, but I didn't really understand the severity of it. It didn't really feel like this experience was me, and it was a really interesting process because I have no history of epilepsy in my family, so it was hard for them to pinpoint exactly what caused my epilepsy and why my brain was behaving this way. So that was kind of hard for me to understand. It's common for people with epilepsy to have auras. So that's kind of like a feeling before you have a seizure that you know you're going to have a seizure. And I don't have that. So I have no idea when I'm going to have a seizure. And that's a little bit scary to not have any moment before, realization before. So that was pretty scary. And also, because I was in high school, I was still trying to figure everything out. That's tough time growing up. So it was kind of like the diagnosis wasn't really a part of me, and I didn't really feel the whole impact of it. I just remember the doctor's appointments and a lot of blood tests being done. I hate blood tests. So that came from all the blood tests I had to do. So it was a really, really weird experience for me with the time period.
During my diagnosis, I didn't really understand what it was because all I knew about seizures and learning disabilities was based off of other people's point of views, what I've read, TV, television, so all of the negative stereotypes, and I was just really confused. I was really in denial of my seizures, especially because For my entire life, up until sixth grade, I was healthy, doing great, got good grades, and then all of a sudden, when sixth grade happened, my whole life went downhill. And I was just really confused, and especially because of the fact that the doctors didn't know what was wrong, what was causing my seizures. All they knew is that they were in my temporal lobe. So there was a lot of times where we didn't know the answers until a couple months ago, which was crazy to think about. And then years later, we figured out that to try this diet called a ketogenic diet, which is a diet that's a low carb, high fat diet, and it's supposed to help people with seizures. So once that started in college, it took a huge toll on my life because I, I couldn't eat milk. I couldn't eat ice cream. There was so many things that I couldn't eat, and all my friends around me were eating stuff. With my learning disability, on the other hand, I didn't take advantage of any of my accommodations because I was embarrassed. I was embarrassed to leave a room full of all my classmates with a folder and then people asking me after class, so why did you leave the room? And you have to say, oh, I have a reader. I need extra time because I have a learning disability. It's an embarrassment. It's an embarrassment when teachers ask you to read and you don't want to read it because you don't know how to pronounce the simple word that everyone else in your class does. All I knew about learning disabilities was the negative stereotypes, and it made me very angry and very bitter.
So the diagnosis process was long and tiring. I did a lot of sleep deprivation EEG. So that's the goal of an EEG is supposed to they're supposed to try to identify seizure activity in the brain. So a sleep deprivation one versus a normal one is when you're only supposed to get 4 hours of sleep. So I would stay up until 12 a.m. with my mom. I'd sleep until 4 a.m. And then my appointment would be somewhere between the hours of like 8 to 11 a.m. And I just remember my mom always used to pick out all these different movies for us to watch. It was really hard to stay up because I need so much sleep to function, and not getting that sleep was really difficult. But that also helped them in identifying seizure activity because some of my seizures were triggered by me not getting enough sleep. So they basically stick 30 to 40 wires around your head and face, and you lay down and they perform a series of tests try to find seizure activity. So one of them is they place a strobe light in your face and you have to watch that for a few minutes. And another one of the tests is just you sleeping. And then another one is blowing on a pinwheel for 3 minutes, which is really intense because it kind of makes you hyperventilate, which is a really uncomfortable feeling. And I always, and still to this day, hate that part of the test. It's just very unnatural and it's really uncomfortable. But I think it's important to note that everyone deals with disability in a different way. And this whole diagnosis process for me was really long, but I didn't really feel, I felt the stigma, but I kind of pushed my diagnosis away from my friends. So it wasn't something we often talked about. They knew that I had doctor's appointments and that I had epilepsy, but because I didn't really understand it myself, it was hard for my friends to really understand what was going on. And I also think for my family, it was confusing too because this wasn't anything that we had to deal with before. And for all I knew, I was totally healthy until high school. So this was a confusing time. And the stigma really didn't hit me until later.
With my seizures, similar to Becca, I also had a lot of EEG testing. The difference was I had a 24-hour EEG as well. So that means I had wires all over my brain and they wanted me to go out in public and have a normal day so that they could try to find different activity and where my seizures were coming from. I was totally embarrassed because here I am in sixth grade, I'm just meeting new people and I have to go out in my community and maybe run into some people that I was in class with when I had my seizure, and having to explain to that when I fully didn't even understand what a seizure was and at the fact that they didn't even know what type of seizures I've had. So it was confusion for everyone, and it was just, I was totally fearful of what other people were going to say and what other kids were going to talk about at school and if they talk about me. And I remember having a migraine to the point where I forgot what it felt like not to have one. On the other hand, with my learning disability, I was so nervous about the negative stereotypes because of everything you hear on the news, and what I heard from other people is just that people with learning disabilities, they're unable to do certain things, which I know for me isn't the fact. And I just was nervous of the stigma and stereotype that other people were going to give me, and I didn't want to be labeled like that. So I didn't take advantage of anything. I thought I was normal and I thought I could handle this on my own. But after I had more seizures and after I was unable to really control myself and needed the support, I realized, why is this happening to me? What's going on in my life? What am I really supposed to do? All I remember hearing was from the doctor that diagnosed me with my learning disability was, you're stupid, you're not going to get anywhere in life. You're not going to be able to pretty much do anything. And I didn't want to hear that, but that's all I heard, and that's everything that I just kept repeating in my head.
As I was preparing for my first year of college, I was a little bit nervous going in knowing that I had epilepsy and I wasn't going to be with my family to help me out. So that was scary. I felt a little bit of fear. But I actually had an EEG before going to college and it came back normal, which was very surprising for me. And the neurologist told me, Becca, you grew out of your epilepsy. And I was like, that's possible? What does that mean? And they said, you don't have epilepsy well, you have epilepsy, but you don't have the symptoms of epilepsy. So this happens sometimes when you grow up and you can grow out of it. This isn't super uncommon. So we're going to take you off your medicine. So to me, it was kind of like out of sight, out of mind. I don't have epilepsy anymore, or I don't have to associate myself with epilepsy. This is amazing. This couldn't have come at a more perfect time. And, I was kind of in denial almost that this was really happening to me, but I felt really relieved. So I went to college. I was off of my medicine for around 2 years. And one morning I woke up and I kind of woke up to my body jerking. And it was a really weird experience. I didn't get a lot of sleep the night before. And I called my mom and I said, I don't know if this is a seizure, but I might have had a seizure. And my mom was like, you should call your neurologist. He kind of told me, we should see if this happens again and we should take precautions. So you need to be careful, but this sometimes happens, so we will see what happens. And then this happened a couple more times, and I saw my neurologist when I was home, and he suggested me going back on medications and doing another EEG, and I did another EEG, and there was seizure activity in my brain. So it made me feel really sad, and I was really angry that this had happened to me, because I had kind of moved past it and didn't really think about it. And now it was like going through a diagnosis a second time. But this time I was in a totally different place in my life. So it was really scary. Um, and there was one day where I ran out of my medicine. And so I went a whole day without my meds. And the next day I was doing work with my friends in my apartment and I had a tonic-clonic seizure. So I was unconscious and my friends were really freaked out. And I came to where two policemen were in my apartment asking me all these questions. And it takes a while once you have a seizure to come out of it and realize what's going on. So it took me a while and I was like, oh my goodness, like this is the first full-blown seizure I've had since being placed on the meds. And I called my dad and he really, I think this was the moment where I kind of needed to hear these things from my dad. He told me that he said, Becca, you're not like everyone else. You can't stay up all night and get no sleep and be okay with that because you're not going to be okay. And you need to make sure that your meds are refilled. You can't go a day without your medicine. This is important. And it kind of put things in perspective for me and said, you know what, Becca, you need to embrace your diagnosis and deal with it because this isn't going to help you if you keep living your life this way. So that's when I really started to take what I had seriously and embrace the fact that I have epilepsy and see what the realities of that were.
Once I began to keep questioning myself and asking myself, what's wrong with me? Why am I doing this? I realized I was going through the different stages of adaptation. And I realized that even with my seizures, I was in denial, I was confused, I was angry, I was bitter. And with my learning disability, I was the same thing, although the difference is that my learning disability, I was able to accept it. With my seizures, there was just so much confusion and just no answers from anyone that I was unable to really figure out what it meant to me. And when I finally, a couple months ago, was able to identify what type of seizures I have, it was a big relief, but it was also scary now living on my own, being unable to drive anymore. I realized that how successful I was when I finally did take advantage of the necessary resources that I had available to me because of this documentation that really changed my life.
As the years went on, as I became a senior in college, I became a lot more comfortable talking about my epilepsy to other people and explaining to them what they had to do if I would ever have a seizure just to make sure that I was safe around people. But I think one of the biggest challenges for me is when I started applying to jobs, I noticed on the forms the jobs that I applied to, it asked me, do you have a disability? And I immediately thought, no, I don't have a disability. But I was curious and I checked the list and epilepsy was on there. And I was honestly really surprised because I never have ever thought of myself as having a disability or anything that was something that like to be stigmatized. And I felt extremely upset and I felt like I had been put as less applicable than other people because I had to say yes to this disability. And I was furious because it asked a yes or no question and I had to put yes, but I couldn't explain A, what my diagnosis was, and B, that at this point I had been seizure free for a while now, and I couldn't say that this wouldn't impact my job, and this had nothing to do with who I am as a person and my skills and my ability to do this job.
When I was going through my experiences with my seizures and my learning disability, there were many difficulties I was having. For my seizures, I didn't fully really understand what it was, especially from the doctors, and I often caught myself using the word you a lot when I was describing it to other people, especially regarding my diet. I now am coming to realize that I use you because I don't know if I can express my true inner feelings I have about my seizures. The true feelings that I can even just express right now. I don't even can think of words to even talk about my seizures because I'm still inside very bitter and I want to find someone that I can relate with. And I asked my doctor and she said that cursive seizures are very rare and I'm the first patient she has that has cursive seizures. That's very scary for me. I just really want to have a connection with someone that I'm able to say, I know what you're going through. So now I'm realizing that I use you because I just want someone to be able to say, I know, I understand, to help me get to that acceptance, that last stage of adaptation. With my learning disabilities, the biggest struggle I honestly had was being publicly embarrassed. Am I able to talk about it with other people without getting embarrassed, without thinking of all the negative stigma, all the negative stereotypes I've been hearing, especially in school? Am I able to talk to my teachers, my professors, be open about it? Because no one wants to have that negative, body language from other people's when you know that maybe deep down they want to help you through it, but the first thought that comes is you have a disability and what does that word really mean? So some of those it's just very difficult, but once you have a good support system, then you're able to overcome those.
Don't you feel like disability doesn't have to be a negative thing all the time? Like, you have your family, I have my family that's been so supportive of me and has really helped me through this process, even through adapting to everything. And, adaptation is a continuous process. We're not always going to feel so comfortable about things, but we're able to accept days at a time. And it's something that it's okay not to always know. And it's okay to be angry, it's okay to be fearful, and embrace all aspects of disability and have the support of yourself and knowing that you've been through so much and that like I've been through so much, but I'm proud of that and I'm proud of how far I've come. And it's a great feeling to know that you're not alone and I'm not alone. And there are so many like support groups and stuff like that, and even just us meeting each other is such
It's so powerful because if we never met each other, then I don't know if I was be able to be comfortable enough to talk about my seizures and be more open. And without the family and friends I have, like you said, holding your hand and everything, then, who knows if I would really be able to live by myself in a city? Who knows if I would really be able to now publicly talk about my learning disability? Someone to kind of give you a reality check and say, this is what your life is like, this is what it is. We may not know the answers why, but we're here to help and support you, and we're here to guide you into the right direction and the right road. You're going to come in with bumps in the road, but that's what adaptation is. That's what everything is. And, everyone goes through the stages differently. You may never, be able to fully accept it. Like my seizures, I may not fully accept it until I'm in, my 30s or 40s. As with my learning disability, I've accepted it, within the last 4 years. So it really varies. But without the support and the need, then I don't know if I would really be here, be comfortable, and I don't even know if I really would have met you.
And we're very fortunate in the sense that we do have the support, and we have ourselves to be proud of, and it's a long journey, and it's definitely not over, and who knows if it'll ever be over, but it's our journey, and it's important that we recognize all the strengths that we do have, and all the strengths that everyone has that are facing challenges in their lives, because it's important to just recognize that and be aware of that, because that's what helps us push through.
No, for sure. And it helps to know that, who we are and what we're supposed to be doing, and the fact that, we're the ones in charge. No one else is in charge.
My disability does not define me.
I define my disability.